1864. The Civil War is in its third year. General Ulysses Grant now commands all Union forces and knows that only hard campaigning will help bring the war to an end. Grant outlines a grand plan to beat the Confederacy. His armies will move on 5 fronts, hoping the South cannot parry all his thrusts. Attacks along the Red River, in the Shenandoah Valley, and south of Richmond are blunted by smaller Confederate forces. In early May, Grant's largest armies launch colossal campaigns, aiming for the Confederate capitals at Richmond and Atlanta. Positioned near Chattanooga, General William Sherman gathers 3 armies. Sherman is opposed by the battered but not beaten Army of Tennessee under General Joseph E. Johnston. Johnston decides to wage a defensive campaign against his more powerful opponent. He aims to keep Sherman at bay long enough for a war-fatigued North to oust the Lincoln administration at the ballot box in November, which might result in a negotiated end to the war. Johnston's army occupies a strong line along Rocky Face Ridge, where rough terrain favors the defenders. In the valley, they flood Mill Creek to limit Sherman's approaches to a critical gap in the ridge. Skirmishing begins May 7th at Tunnel Hill, and soon lines of blue-clad troops move on Rocky Face Ridge, where fierce fighting erupts and lasts for 5 days. Meanwhile, General James McPherson's part of Sherman's force marches through Snake Creek Gap, aiming to cut Johnston's supply line and block his route of retreat toward Atlanta. Once through the gap, however, McPherson proceeds cautiously toward Resaca. This delay allows Johnston to take up a strong line protecting his southward lifeline. Heavy skirmishing on May 13th is followed by Union attacks for the next 2 days. 4 Union corps hammer the Confederate center and left, but terrible terrain and staunch defense render the assaults costly and unsuccessful. While the bulk of Sherman's force fights it out on the main line, some men move around the Confederates. These men gain a foothold that threatens to cut Johnston's retreat route. Johnston abandons Resaca and moves southward. En route, Confederate leaders see an opportunity to force Sherman to divide his columns near Cassville. The Confederates hope to attack an isolated wing of Sherman's army, but U.S. cavalry appears at a strategic location, and Johnston calls off the attack. Union troops continue pushing southward. Johnston's troops next block Sherman at the formidable Allatoona Pass. Rather than attack headlong, Sherman breaks away from his supply line and moves westward into a tangled wilderness. Johnston anticipates the move and has troops in place to block the way at New Hope Church. General Joe Hooker's men attack, but Confederates behind stout earthworks and in heavy tangled terrain maul the advancing troops. Union troops dub the area the Hellhole. Both sides dig in. While heavy skirmishing flares along the line, Union troops try to gain the Confederate right flank. But Confederate cavalry and reinforcements under General Patrick Cleburne extend the rebel line. Union attacks at Pickett's Mill and a Confederate thrust at Dallas the next day fail. Fighting continues as Sherman returns to his supply line. Heavy rain slows movement as Army morale sinks. For those on the picket line and in the trenches, insects make the situation all but unbearable. Confederates abandon the Dallas New Hope line and fall back to another strong defensive line. Lost Mountain anchors one end, and Brushy Mountain anchors the other. Atop nearby Pine Mountain, General Leonidas Polk is cut in two by Union artillerist Captain Hubert Dilger. Sherman again threatens Johnston's flanks, and before long, the Confederates retreat to the foothills of Kennesaw Mountain, where the Confederates have prepared extensive field works using slave labor. General John Bell Hood, always ready for a fight, attacks at Kolb's farm. The unauthorized assaults accomplish little. The heavy rains finally subside, and the roads dry quickly. Sherman thinks that the long Confederate line must be weak somewhere. He decides to launch a direct attack. On June 27th, Union artillery pounds the Confederate line for an hour before Sherman's men advance toward the Kennesaw Mountains and Cheatham's Hill. The blue-clad foot soldiers attack fiercely in scorching hot weather. But the Confederates unleash a storm of iron and lead from behind formidable works of earth and log. Sherman's men are cut down all along the line. Bodies of those killed and wounded stack up on Cheatham's Hill at the dead angle. Here, the attackers gain a toehold in front of the rebel trenches and close quarters fighting rages. But the combat settles nothing. The opposing forces remain along the Kennesaw line. They skirmish in stifling heat through the last days of June. Drying roads carry Sherman's men around the Confederates again. Union troops race toward the Chattahoochee River, thought to be the last significant barrier guarding Atlanta. The cavalry threatens to cross the river to the east, while the main force pushes forward at Smyrna. There, Johnston holds a strong, prepared line, but a powerful attack forces him back once again. The rebels retreat, but stop on the north bank of the Chattahoochee River in a strong 6-mile-long series of defensive bunkers designed to create crossfire. Sherman refuses to attack. For the next few days, Sherman's armies search for a crossing point and ultimately force one near Roswell. Soon, thousands of Sherman soldiers are on the river's south bank and less than a dozen miles from the center of Atlanta. Johnston pulls back across the river and consolidates, while Sherman arrays his army in a massive arc. Confederate President Jefferson Davis has had enough. Frustrated by Johnston's retreats and angry that the general has shared little in the way of plans for the campaign, he relieves him of command and elevates John Bell Hood to lead the Army of Tennessee. Hood believes that part of the Union Army will be vulnerable as it crosses Peachtree Creek. He plans an attack that aims to destroy the isolated force before reinforcements can arrive to help. Things go wrong at the outset. The appearance of an unexpected Union force to the east causes Hood to spend hours adjusting his line of battle. The delay gives General George Thomas's veterans time to safely cross the creek and entrench. When the Confederates attack, they briefly threaten the Union flank, but the defensive line steadies, and the attacks fail. Later assaults make similar gains, but all are hurled back. The battle ends as Hood withdraws his men to the main line of trenches guarding Atlanta. Though beaten at Peachtree Creek, Hood continues to think offensively. Just 36 hours later, he launches the largest attack of the campaign. Hood's plan is complicated. It requires a 15-mile march through the dark and in stifling heat to reach a position from which they are ordered to launch a dawn attack against a reportedly unprotected flank of the Army of Tennessee. Heat, rough terrain, choking dust, and the death of Confederate General W.H.T. Walker slows the columns. When the attack finally gets underway at noon, Confederate troops encounter a wall of experienced U.S. soldiers rather than the expected weak Union flank. The carefully planned battle becomes a massive melee instead. Fierce fighting rages as General Cleburne's Confederates begin to break through the Union line. Union General James McPherson accidentally rides too close to the fray and is killed. General Hood orders General Frank Cheatham's men to attack, but the Union forces hold firm, then turn the tide. More than 8,800 casualties are added to the rolls, 2/3 of them Confederates. In the face of Hood's counterblows, Sherman continues his flanking moves and maneuvers to cut the railroad lines that connect Atlanta with the major supply depots in Georgia and Alabama. Hood's men try but fail to disrupt Sherman's movements. Confederates are pinned down in the trenches around Atlanta. After warning the population to evacuate, Sherman's artillery begins to bombard the city. Soldiers take cover, and the 3,000 civilians huddle in hastily built bomb-proof dugouts in their gardens. At the height of the artillery barrage on August 9th, more than 5,000 shells fly into the city. Confederate soldier and civilian morale sink to even lower levels. Battles and cavalry raids in late July and early August failed to fully cut off Atlanta's supplies. So Sherman decides to send 6 corps towards Jonesboro, south of Atlanta, to complete the job. Alarmed by the move, Hood leaves a small force to hold the trenches around Atlanta and marches southward to save the last railroad. As Union troops close in, Hood attacks. In 2 days of fighting at Jonesboro, Union troops batter the Army of Tennessee and cut the remaining rail line. General Hood, out of options, orders the Army to leave Atlanta. Victorious Union troops enter the city on September 2nd. The Northern public rejoices, re-elects President Lincoln, and looks toward ending this terrible war. Thanks to preservationists, past and present, you can walk in the footsteps of the Atlanta campaign's combatants at Rocky Face Ridge, Resaca, Pickett's Mill, and Kennesaw Mountain, and ponder what happened there and why it matters to this day.